We just had two regionals wrap up this past weekend with both Milwaukee and Belo Horizonte. In today's video, I'm going to be looking at the best decks in the format that you can play right now. If you have any tournaments coming up, these are the decks that I think you should be playing as they have the best chance of winning the entire thing. We are seeing a little bit of an evolution in the meta right now, and I'm excited to look at what the best decks are. This video, by the way, is not going to be in any specific order, just going to be talking about what the best decks are. It's not in any order, though, so it's not going to be like the top 10 or top whatever best decks. But yeah, let's get into the video and check it out. Gardevoir EX is still the best deck you can play right now. Yeah, I did lose in the finals to Jackson Ford's Charizard deck, but I mean, let's be real. Gardevoir is still going to be the deck to be right now. There's no changing that. There's a reason why there's so many different dark decks popping up right now. But I mean, realistically, if you want to win a tournament, play Gardevoir EX. That's just my hot take. I think Gardy actually can still beat a lot of the big dark decks, especially the newcomer, the Kangaskhan Absol deck. Now, there are a few ways you can play a Gardy deck right now. We see a few different builds that did well this past weekend. We did have the Jellicent Gardy build, which I think is still fairly solid. You have Henry Chow and Abon's latest Gardy contraption here with the Enamorous and the Turbo Energizes. But then we also have, and the one I wanted to call out here was Gustavo Wada's build that won over in Belo Horizonte, playing the Drifloon and the Mega Gardevoir EX. This one does have a little bit more 1-hit KO potential with the Gardy and the Drifloon actually being pretty good to have versus the Kangaskhan deck. So I think this build has a slightly better matchup into the Mega Kangaskhan Absol deck and honestly potentially even Charizard because you can actually blow up the Charizards a lot easier with the Drifloon. But I think both builds are still pretty solid. Again, the three different ways to play the deck right now are the Jellicent build, you got the Enamorous one, and then you have the Mega Gardy build. But yeah, I mean, if you realistically want to win a tournament right now, you got a League Cup coming up, a League Challenge. Playing Gardevoir gives you the best chance of winning it. I still think it is the best deck in the format by far. Of course, we got to talk about the big new deck that's all the rage right now, Mega Kangaskhan Mega Absol. Now, this deck is pretty crazy and was pioneered by Tord Reklev and really popularized this archetype. And I think this deck is here to stay. It had a very good showing in Milwaukee, but I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think this deck is still just as good as it was. Now, maybe it's going to slip a little bit in play, maybe because people are now going to start figuring out the deck more often. I mean, we have some Metafy classes coming out, which might hurt the deck overall. So more people are going to know how to beat this deck, which I think actually is a pretty big weakness for the deck. And once people start to figure out how to beat it more and stuff like that, I think this deck will slightly get a bit worse, but I think it is here to stay as a potential strong archetype. Like, even when we get into the Phantasmal Flames meta, I think this deck will still probably be a good deck. And it is one of the better decks that does have a bit of an edge into Gardy. It's not an auto win, but you do have that Mega Absol EX, which can rip cards away from Gardevoir's hand. The Mega Kangaskhan is really good. The Cornerstone Ogre Pawn is strong too. I mean, realistically, this deck's worst matchups are like Joltik Box and Ceruledge, which isn't the worst thing ever to have, considering you can beat almost anything else in the format. I think this deck is very good, here to stay, and I'm sure we'll see more innovations and evolutions of this archetype as we move into the next couple of regionals, because this deck, I think, is still very good. It's just, it's got to adapt to people now adapting to this deck existing. But this deck is very strong, and I definitely think that it is a great pick right now to play, and one of the better decks that can beat Gardevoir thanks to Mega Absol. Now, speaking of Ceruledge, it's actually still a pretty good deck right now, mainly because it has such a good matchup into the Mega Kangaskhan Mega Absol deck. I mean, having all the switch outs with the Jets, the Turos, really good to have against their Evil Tall strat, which is usually how they're going to try to beat Ceruledge anyways, and just having the ability to one-hit KO them fairly easily with Abyssal Flames is really nice. You just shred through all their decks like butter. I still think Ceruledge is one of the top decks to play right now, and it's still just a very strong and fast deck that a lot of decks can struggle to keep up with. This might struggle a little bit more into a more aggressive Gardy meta if they're going to be playing Drifloons now, overplaying of the Jellicent, because this deck has a very solid matchup into Gardy Jelly. So this might hurt it if we do see more Drifloon and Mega Gardevoir pop up for Gardevoir. I think this deck is still great. And if you want to play a deck that has arguably one of the best matchups into Kangaskhan Absol, I definitely recommend trying out Ceruledge. I think it's still a great pick. And even though we didn't see any in top 8 in Milwaukee, I almost got top 16 here. I got Ross Kaufman's list pulled up here. And this deck I still think is amazing and one of the top decks to play right now, as it does have a good matchup into some of the big decks. Of course, classical Poltnor ain't going anywhere. Dragapult Dusnoir is still going to be a solid deck right now. I mean, we almost saw one make top 8 in Milwaukee, despite Psyduck being around now and, decks now playing Psyduck more frequently, like Charizard, the Kangaskhan Absol deck, even Grimmsnarl playing it. Dragapult Dusnoir is still very good. I mean, it's just like Gardevoir. It's just a deck that theoretically can beat anything in the format apart from, debatably Gardevoir. But at the end of the day, Poltnor is just a strong, powerful deck that doesn't really take any bad matchups apart from maybe just a bad Gardy matchup, right? And outside of that, I mean, it still can beat almost anything. The Dusnoir package is still very strong. Dragapult is still good. I mean, in the hands of a really skilled and talented player, Poltnor is still one of the top decks you can play right now. I think this deck is going to still see a bit of a decline in play because some people might not realize it's not terrible terrible into Kangaskhan Absol, and people might, be like a little scared of the Guardy matchup, which is still sus, obviously. But, Poltner is still very strong, right? It's just a deck that can beat almost anything when it's in the room. And, yeah, Poltner's good. Still got to highlight it here in this video, despite the deck maybe dropping off a little bit. I mean, if we do see a little bit more Charizard now, because of one Milwaukee, then maybe Poltner gets a lot better, because more Charizard, hey, it's just better for Poltner. I mean, Jackson's build didn't even play Psyduck in it. Speaking of Charizard, we got to talk about Charizard. Now, Charizard did win Milwaukee, and I think it's still looking like one of the best decks you can play right now. I mean, really, just at the end of the day, Charizard is a strong and powerful Dark-type attacker that does have a good matchup into Gardevoir, and Jackson Ford's first place list here, I think, has the best chance of beating Gardevoir out of any of the Charizard variants, mainly because you're playing Dusnoir and Shaman, which really do help fix that matchup. The Dusnoir does allow you to KO multiple Pokemon in a single turn. It allows you to effectively kill a Gardevoir and a Rouse and a Kirlia in one turn, wiping out all of their options for Gardevoir, and lets you have Shaman, which is very good against Screamtail, so you don't have your Duskulls or your Pidgeys sniped off the bench early by Screamtail. This build is still very, very solid in my opinion, and I think if you want to play Charizard, Jackson's build is probably the best 60 to play right now. There is the slow version of it with the multiple Monkey Dories and whatnot. That build is still decent, but I mean, if you really want to just have the best time into Gardevoir, I think you have to play the Dusnoir package right now, in my opinion, because Charizard can still fumble to Guardy, especially now if we do see them go back to playing stuff like the Drifloon in the deck, which obviously can one-shot your Charizard. I mean, I doubt you're going to start putting Tool Scrapper or Jamming Tower in your Charizard deck. Doesn't seem very good. I think you do have to play Charizard right now with Dusnoir just to give you the best chance into Gardevoir. Even the new Guardy variants are still going to need some kind of answer with that Dusnoir. But yeah, Zard is good, and I know a lot of people are big fans of Charizard, so if you're a fan of Charizard, now's a pretty good time to play Charizard. Like I said, Poltner is still on the decline right now, and I still think Poltner will still be on the decline right now, and once you figure out Charizard's lines, maybe into the Kangaskhan Absol deck, I think you're going to have yourself a pretty good deck for the upcoming regionals and tournaments. I do want to mention a fairly underrated deck to play right now, and that is Gholdengo Rocks. Now, Dengo didn't have the greatest performance in Milwaukee. It did underperform. It did get top 32, and this is the top 32 list that I pulled up here from my friend Austin. I think this build actually is the best way to play Dengo Rocks right now, and that's because there's a Lucario in the deck. The Mega Lucario effectively gives this deck a great matchup into Kangaskhan Absol, which is a bad matchup for Gholdengo otherwise. Even the other variants of Gholdengo, except for arguably Jengo, which isn't the greatest deck right now, I think that Mega Lucario really does help fix Gholdengo's matchup into that Kangaskhan Absol deck. And I mean, outside of that, Dengo's still pretty good into Dragapult. It's not great into Charizard, but I think if you can play a bit aggressive with your rocks, you can definitely run Zard off the board before they set up and maybe get a big lead. And of course, your Guardy matchup isn't terrible either, especially now if they're pivoting away from Jellicent, then Dengo gets even better. You can maybe slide in a Tool Scrapper in this deck if you think Guardy's going to start going back to playing Drifloon again. But I really like this build of Dengo a lot. I think it is the best way to play Gholdengo right now, and I think that Mega Lucario completely fixes your problem versus Kangaskhan Absol, which I think is a pretty big deal right now. And I think with the good matchup in a Kanga Absol with the addition of Lucario, this deck looks like a pretty solid deck to play right now in our standard format. So if you want to play Dengo, I recommend this Gholdengo Lucario build. Grimmsnarl is still here, and it did get top 8 in Milwaukee. Now, Grimm is, known maybe as a fraud deck, but I don't think it's a fraud deck at all. I think this deck is still very solid, and Brandon Salazar's list here looks pretty good. The one thing to note, he doesn't play the Eviltal. Instead, he opted to play Maractus still, which is interesting. You can obviously try out Eviltal in this build, but I'm sure Brandon had a good reason for playing Maractus. But Brandon did play a Psyduck in his deck, which was pretty important to have against the Dusnoir variants of Charizard and Dragapult. I mean, if you want to play a really good Grimm list, this is a great pick. Now, I'm not sold yet on Grimm's matchup into the Kanga Absol deck. I've been told that Grimmsnarl loses to Kangaskhan Absol because effectively they just don't do anything, and like they can just kind of sit there and just not do anything, and it's really tough for you to beat them. That's what I've heard they do. They have the Eviltal to like trap your own Monkey Dories or your Frost Sauces and stuff. They also play Cornerstone Ogerpon, which is kind of annoying for Grimmsnarl to deal with too. So yeah, I've been told that matchup isn't very favored for Grimmsnarl. But yeah, Grimm is still a great deck right now, and I like it a lot. It's definitely one that might be a bit more challenging because there's so much like damage counters and damage manipulation you have to keep track of and whatnot. A lot of math involved. But I mean, if you can master Grimmsnarl, it's a pretty solid deck. I think it's still fine into Gardevoir, especially if we maybe see a little bit of a pivot away from the Devos and the Jellicents. I think Grimm gets a little bit better because Grimm always struggles into Jelly Devos, in my opinion. That is one way they can run you off the board. But now that they're pivoting away from that, Grimm, I think, still stays pretty solid. So if you want to pick up another really strong dark deck to play right now, I highly recommend trying out Grimmsnarl. You just probably have to figure out how you're beating the Kangaskhan Absol matchups consistently and figure out the lines. I think this deck is pretty good into that deck. But yeah, those are the best decks in the format right now. I do want to give a bit of an honorable mention to like Gardevoir EX and Joltik Box. Joltik Box seems actually fairly solid right now because it does have a good matchup in a Kangaskhan Absol, and Zoroark is always just going to be a really strong dark deck, but it does have a weaker matchup into the Kangaskhan Absol deck, and also not great into Charizard either, which does hold it back, which is why I didn't put them on the list, but those are also really solid at plays right now in the standard format. But yeah, the meta is looking pretty cool. I'm liking the evolution, and hopefully we continue to see an evolution in the meta heading into Lille and the Las Vegas Regional Championships. I'm sure some of these decks I highlighted are going to continue to get more innovations, more updates to keep up with the meta, especially the Kangaskhan Absol deck. Now that everyone's going to be figuring out the deck and stuff, I do think the deck's going to have to adapt to the format. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, leave a like. If you're new here to the second channel, subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. And yeah, catch you on another video very soon here. Bye-bye.